Hi, I'm Maelis. I lost my job, and my parents kicked me out the next day. No warning, no kindness. Just a suitcase at the door and a lock that no longer fit my key. But that wasn't the worst part. They called me a burden while living in the house I paid off. They said I was unstable while draining the savings I earned. They erased me from family photos, from their stories, from the life I helped build. But here's what they didn't know. I had a secret. And now, they're about to find out. Would you stay silent too, if it meant keeping your power hidden until the perfect moment? Thanksgiving has a way of dressing up disappointments. The linen was perfectly pressed. The table centerpiece was bursting with miniature pumpkins and faux pine cones, and my name was, conspicuously, absent from the place cards. I sat in a metal folding chair at the far corner of the table, the only one without a cushion. No wine glass, no linen napkin, just a silent cue. I was a placeholder, not a guest. It had been 3 weeks since I moved back into my mother's house after the layoff. I didn't tell anyone the full story. To them, I was between opportunities, the kind of vague phrasing that keeps things palatable. Vera, my mother, didn't ask. Isolde, my sister, didn't care. And Dorian, well, he just cracked another beer and nodded like silence counted as support. The meal began with the usual pleasantries, all performed through strained smiles and exaggerated gratitude. Isolde launched into her latest divorce case victory like it was a war story. Vera kept smiling, nodding, offering slices of pie as if that compensated for the undercurrent of tension knotted under the tablecloth. Then came the comment, syrupy and sharp. "Maybe next year we save this seat for someone who can contribute to the grocery bill," Vera said, eyes on her plate, voice loud enough to silence the room. Nobody looked at me, not even Dorian. I swallowed, smiled slightly, and reached for a roll I didn't want. My hand trembled. Not from shock, I'd been bracing for this, but from the sting of confirmation. They thought I was disposable. Hours earlier, I'd overheard the caterer asking Vera, "Should we still count that +1 if Maelis is staying?" The question wasn't even malicious. It was practical. They hadn't intended for me to be here. I was just an afterthought they forgot to delete from the guest list. Isolde's voice filled the air again, this time bragging about her firm expanding to Napa. Dorian, with his eternally unfinished dreams, was excitedly talking about a new bar concept. "It's going to be different this time," he said, and Vera placed a hand over his and said, "We believe in you." Nobody asked me how I was. Nobody asked what I was working on. And when I opened my mouth to speak, twice, I was talked over without hesitation. That folding chair started to feel like a trap, like it was bolted to every bad decision I ever made, every time I'd given too much and asked too little. I scanned the room. My mother's house, technically my house, though nobody acted like it, suddenly felt like a stage where I was cast as the extra. At one point, I tried to excuse myself. Vera smiled. "Don't be dramatic, dear." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being done. I stood, slowly, left the half-finished roll on my plate, pushed the chair back without scraping the floor, and walked down the hallway. Nobody followed, not a single step. I reached the small guest room at the end of the hall, the room I had been allowed to stay in, and grabbed my coat. My suitcase had been packed for 3 days. Not out of paranoia, just instinct. I knew a storm was coming, and I didn't plan on getting wet. At the front door, I hesitated. The murmur of laughter floated from the dining room like the soundtrack to someone else's life. I looked over my shoulder. No one had noticed I was gone. Or if they had, no one cared. My hand gripped the doorknob. My breath caught, not from sadness, but from relief. Because in that moment, I knew something they didn't. If I stayed, I vanished. If I left, I might survive. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a letter that made silence into a sound they couldn't ignore. The pages smelled like old ink and cedar, and his handwriting was like a hand on my back saying, "Stand up." The wind that night bit through my coat as I sat outside Vera's house. The same one I had helped save once. The same one they pretended I'd never touched. My suitcase sat beside me, a silent companion. I watched the porch light flicker. Not a single voice called after me, not even out of obligation. I thought about how many times I had walked through that front door with groceries, pay stubs, and good news. How many times I'd returned from work, tired but grateful. Now, the door was just another wall, and for the first time in years, I had no keys. By morning, the ache in my lower back from sleeping upright in the car was nothing compared to what came next. I tried my key out of habit, jiggled it once, then again. It didn't budge. I bent down and noticed the scratches were fresh. New lock. My jaw clenched as I knocked, twice. A pause. Then a shadow moved behind the frosted glass. Vera opened the door just a crack. Her face didn't look angry. It looked rehearsed. "It's better this way," she said. "For everyone. We can't keep enabling you." No apology, no explanation, just a neat little sentence as if she were cutting a service, not a daughter. I stood there, stunned. This wasn't impulsive. It had been planned, calculated. She allowed me in, for 5 minutes. "Just to gather what's yours," she said. No offer to help, no warmth, just ticking time and a list of what wasn't mine anymore. As I stepped inside, something new caught my eye. A framed family photo in the hallway, probably taken just a few weeks ago. I paused. There I was, technically, cropped at the edge, only half my face visible. Like someone had tried to Photoshop me out, but left enough to avoid questions. No one mentioned it. They didn't need to. The message was clear. My old bedroom didn't smell like me anymore. They'd replaced the curtains, painted the walls a muted beige, even swapped the doorknob. The books I'd carefully stacked were gone. My favorite blanket? Folded in a donation bin. My perfume had been replaced with lavender potpourri. It smelled like a guest room at a low-end Airbnb. It was eerie how quickly they erased me, as if I'd only ever been passing through. I packed quietly. A few blouses, a pair of worn boots, a coffee mug I bought in college that read, "I pay my own bills." The irony made me chuckle, but it caught in my throat. Dorian passed me in the hallway and looked past me like I was wallpaper. Isolde was seated at the dining table with her phone pressed to her ear, nodding as if business couldn't wait 5 minutes to acknowledge her sister's erasure. As I neared the door, Vera appeared behind me, arms crossed. "Don't forget your meds," she said with perfect maternal tone. I turned toward her, met her eyes, but said nothing. There was nothing left to say that she hadn't already decided to ignore. In my head, I screamed, "You think this house raised itself? You think that heat, those repairs, those damn groceries paid for themselves while your perfect children were finding themselves?" But I didn't say it out loud. Some truths lose power when shouted. I walked down the steps slowly, deliberately, opened my trunk, placed the suitcase inside. The street was still, the sun rising reluctantly through morning mist. Then I saw it. A box labeled "Giveaway" sat near the garage. Torn books, old blankets. And on top of it all, my father's sketchbook. Leather-bound, corner-worn, still stained with the pen he used to bite while he thought. I reached for it, fingers trembling. I opened to the first page. My name, written in his scrawl. A date. I flipped through. Drawings of me as a child, our backyard, my first car, a diagram he made of our broken stove, titled, "Maelis fixed this." They hadn't just thrown away my things. They'd tried to throw away my witness. But not this one, not this time. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't slam the trunk. I just stood taller. For the first time in years, my back felt straight. My hands felt steady. The version of me that had always been quietly surviving was done whispering. That sketchbook didn't just hold his drawings. It held the only version of me that ever felt seen. The clerk blinked at me, her fingers pausing mid-typing as I slid the manila folder across the counter. "I'd like to check the legal status," I said, my voice level. "Under my name." She looked down, then back up. "Of course. Let me just pull up the records." I nodded. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head so many times, it felt like déjà vu. Only this time, I was done asking for space. I was claiming it. The night before, I barely slept. The motel's ceiling was that rough, popcorn texture, ugly, porous, a surface that always looked like it had a story to hide. I laid on my back, staring into it, tracing invisible constellations as dawn crept through the broken blinds and cut light into the room like prison bars. The bed smelled like bleach and air freshener, a manufactured clean. Beside me, my sketchbook sat open on the nightstand. The pages had curled from use and time, corners dog-eared, graphite smudged like ghosted memories. I hadn't drawn in months, but the lines still felt familiar, like an old friend who understood me better than blood ever had. I reached for a journal I hadn't opened in over a year. I didn't even know why I'd packed it, but I was glad I had. The cover was frayed at the edges. The paper inside still held the scent of ink and something hopeful. I flipped to the last blank page and wrote, "Being erased isn't loud. It's like being penciled over in someone else's hand." Then I put the pen down. I didn't cry. That part of me had dried up a long time ago, tucked away with other luxuries like softness and trust. By mid-morning, I sat cross-legged on the motel bed, checking emails on my laptop. One name jumped out, a cousin I hadn't heard from in years. The subject line read, "So proud of your family." I clicked. Her message gushed about how inspiring it was that Isolde and Dorian had held the family together when the house almost went into foreclosure years ago. She admired their sacrifice, their selflessness, the way they'd kept the legacy alive. I laughed, but not the warm kind. It was sharp, bitter. It tasted metallic, like blood on a bitten tongue. Flashback, I'd sold my stake in a tech project I co-developed, a wellness tracker that ended up going public. Quietly, without any announcement or pat on the back, I wired $39,150 into the family account. No fanfare, just a quiet deposit that pulled them back from the edge of losing the house. They thanked me, once. A quick text. And that was it. After a while, I stopped hearing my name mentioned when the story came up. According to the family, Isolde had handled the bank, and Dorian had sweet-talked the loan manager. I became a ghost with a checkbook. I never wanted applause, but I didn't think I'd be erased. On impulse, I opened the family group chat. I had sent a message the day before, asking about a winter coat I left at the house. Was it still in the closet, or did it get donated? I wrote. No one replied. But just a few messages above, Dorian had posted a meme. Adult children still living off mommy. 5 people reacted with the laugh emoji. That included Vera. That included Mom. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Not in anger, just recognition. Then I removed myself from the group. No dramatic goodbye, just clarity. My thoughts drifted to the last real conversation I had with Vera. I just finished pitching the beta version of the wellness platform I had spent 2 years building, hoping, stupidly, she might say something kind, something sisterly. She glanced over her glasses and said, "Real success looks like your sister's firm. What you're doing feels like a phase." A phase. A week later, I sold my private equity share. That same phase funded the last mortgage payment on the house. She never told anyone, not even me. She let the narrative go on. Isolde the savior, Dorian the hero, and me? The wanderer, the unstable one. But the truth was always in my files. Back in the present, I found myself parked in front of Judith's notary office. It looked exactly the same. A hand-painted wooden sign, a wind chime with missing beads, and a brass plaque that had dulled from the sun. I sat in my car for a while, letting the engine tick down. In my hands was the original title to the house, one I'd insisted on keeping years ago. Vera had rolled her eyes at the time. "It'll just confuse things," she said. "Let's keep everything centralized." I smiled and replied, "Just for legal reasons." Instinct told me to hold on to it. And now, That instinct was my shield. I stepped out of the car into the cold December air. The sky was low and colorless. It felt fitting. I stared at the office door, inhaled once, then walked forward. Inside, the bell above the door gave its familiar jangle. Judith looked up from her desk, startled. "No appointment?" she asked. I lifted the folder. My hand didn't shake. "I don't need one," I said quietly. "I own the damn address." And for the first time in years, that statement felt not like a reminder, but a declaration. The response came not from Vera or Isolde, but from their lawyer, and it proved they'd been planning something I wasn't supposed to find. 2 days after the notary visit, I sat in the far corner of the public library. The overhead lights hummed softly, and the hum sounded louder than it should. On the screen in front of me were all the files the lawyer had accidentally copied me on. Mortgage records, title documents, email threads. My name was everywhere. Purchase, ownership, refinancing. The checks? Mine. The final payment? Me. The name on the property? Not Vera. Not Dorian. Not Isolde. Me. They hadn't forgotten. They knew, and they went out of their way to never say it. I stared at the last page of the refinance paperwork for a long time. Not because I needed confirmation, but because I wanted to burn the image of it into my memory, so I wouldn't let anyone gaslight me about what I'd done, what I owned. A message buzzed on my phone. Isolde. Brunch Sunday, casual. Mom says come if you're not busy. No drama, please. I almost deleted it, but I didn't. Sunday, I walked in to find them already seated at the patio table of some overpriced wine cafe. Vera waved like I'd just come back from college, not like she'd had the locks changed 2 weeks prior. Isolde gestured at the empty chair across from her, sunglasses perched high on her head like a crown. We barely made it past ordering when Isolde smiled and said, "Well, at least Maelis doesn't have to worry about income. She's mastered the art of living off everyone else." Dorian chuckled. Even Vera smiled, that tight, polite smile she uses in front of other people. "Your sister's just teasing," Vera added. "We all know you're figuring things out. Eventually." I didn't flinch, didn't drop my fork. I nodded and took a sip of water. But inside, I carved their words into a wall in my mind I had stopped painting over. Noted the date, the hour, the pitch of Isolde's voice. I made no scene, but I made a vow. Later that evening, back at the motel, I sat on the floor with my laptop and stared at an empty email draft. My fingers hovered above the keys. They'd defined me again, publicly, framed me as a leech, a failure, a punchline. But I remembered the $15,000 wire transfer I sent to bail out Dorian's second bar. The one he never paid back. The one I made anonymously so he could look like a provider in front of his ex-wife. I'd made myself invisible for their comfort. But invisibility doesn't protect you from being misunderstood. It just makes the misunderstanding easier to spread. I started typing. 2. Vera Quayle, Isolde Marin, subject. Use of name, financial control message. If either of you uses my name, likeness, or references my financial contributions without written consent, I will pursue legal recourse. I am not an idea you get to reshape for your convenience. I am a person. One with receipts. I didn't send it, not yet. But I saved it. Then I opened the box I'd pulled from storage the day before. Startup prototypes, printouts from beta launches, early investor letters. Proof of the thing they dismissed as a phase. They thought they'd branded me as irrelevant. They didn't realize that silence wasn't my weakness. It had been my strategy. That night, I spread those papers out across the floor like a map. And I made a new plan. No more apologies. No more permission. The quiet fire they ignored had turned into something else now. It had a name, a history, a contract, and a house. That night, I pressed send. My name wasn't up for discussion anymore. It was a signature. They wanted to talk about boundaries. I was coming with a binder. 3 days after I saved that email draft, I woke to a new message. Not from Vera or Isolde, but their attorney. The subject line was as polished as the family nameplate still hanging outside the house I technically owned: clarification regarding property rights. The body of the message said, "It appears there may be some misunderstanding about your role in regard to the family home's title." Misunderstanding? I built that roof over their heads. Quietly, efficiently, alone. Still in my robe, I opened my banking app for the first time in weeks, drawn to a feeling I couldn't explain. I pulled up the old shared account, one Vera and I opened together back when I was naive enough to believe family and money could ever mix. The balance read $4. Scrolling through the transaction history, I noticed emergency withdrawals with vague memos like car repair, medical copay, and one that said business opportunity. Most were from last year, right around when Dorian was trying to open his second bar. The one that failed before its sign was ever mounted. No notification, no apology, just silence. They emptied me without ever admitting they were thirsty. I closed the app and opened social media, needing a distraction but finding insult. Isolde had posted a photo of the house, my house, with a long caption: "Grateful to Mom and Dorian for holding this family together during the hardest years. We protected what mattered most. Legacy!" She tagged them. She praised them. My name wasn't mentioned. I sat still for a moment, staring at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't tap to wake it up. I didn't comment. I didn't send a text. I just breathed. Shallow, deliberate. They always told the story better once I was out of frame. I stood and opened the folder my father left behind, found Judith Sayer's card, the notary who finalized the title transfer 2 years ago. She picked up on the third ring. "Judith, this is Maelis Calder. I need you to confirm something for me." Her voice didn't hesitate. "Yes, Maelis. That house is yours. Full transfer. Legal, recorded, signed by your father before he passed." I thanked her. Then I opened a blank document, drafted a cease and desist, and printed it at the corner copy shop. I mailed it certified, tracked it, filed the receipt. The letter read, "You cannot spend me and then ask for the receipt. I am not your backup plan." By mid-afternoon, I walked into a small printing store downtown where the owner still used a landline and called everyone "sweetheart." I handed over a USB and said, "Make me 200 business cards, double-sided, gloss finish." "What's the name, honey?" he asked. "Calder Strategic Advisory." "You starting fresh?" "No," I said. "I'm finally using my own name." As I waited, I looked around the shop. Shelves of paper, ink, labels. So many ways to make a mark. I thought about how long I'd let other people write my biography in disappearing ink. The cards came out warm, edges sharp. I slid one between my fingers, flipped it over slowly. Black ink, bold type. Not the name I used to sign birthday cards. Not the nickname my mother used when she wanted something. Just Maelis Calder, untouchable. That evening, I returned to the motel with a small stack of envelopes. I sealed a card inside each one. No notes, no return address. Just names on the front. Vera, Isolde, Dorian. No more explanations. No more requests. They could keep their version of me, if they wanted, but they'd have to do it without using my name. The silence from Vera was expected. The summons to a family meeting the next day? That wasn't. Ophelie's voice trembled like a violin string about to snap. "They're planning to cut you out. Completely. The house. The nonprofit. Even the story of how it all began." Her words sat with me long after the call ended, echoing through the silence like a second heartbeat. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. By the next afternoon, I was standing on the porch of the house that never stopped asking more of me. The siding looked the same. The porch light still flickered when the wind blew too hard, and the swing creaked like it held memories too heavy to forget. But nothing about this place felt like home anymore. It was a museum of my effort, and their entitlement. Vera had requested a calm discussion about boundaries. I arrived with a binder. Dorian opened the front door like someone who'd been assigned a task and didn't quite agree with it. No hello. No expression, just a half nod toward the hallway, like I was some contractor here to fix a leak they'd caused. I walked past him without a glance, heels clicking on the hardwood I paid to have refinished. 3 summers ago, when I still believed that giving more would mean being seen. The living room was staged like a peace offering, but everything felt rehearsed. Vera sat upright on the couch in one of her starched blouses, holding a glass of iced tea that was more ice than tea. Her smile was paper-thin. Isolde took up her usual corner in the armchair, one leg crossed tightly over the other, a legal pad in her lap, and a pen tapping out a steady beat of passive aggression. She didn't look up. I could feel the scene they'd pre-written in their minds. I'd come in apologetic, subdued, perhaps even teary-eyed. The wayward daughter, ready to be managed. I didn't sit. "I want to be clear," I said, placing the binder down and flipping it open to the first page. My voice didn't shake. This house was signed over to me in 2021. Legally, fully. Dad did it himself. I have the notarized deed here, and the county has the rest. Vera blinked, slowly. Isolde stopped tapping her pen. "This isn't your house," I continued. "Not anymore. Not for a long time. You've been living here under the assumption that I wouldn't exercise my rights, that I'd stay silent, out of guilt or habit. That ends today." Dorian shifted uncomfortably in the corner of the room. He didn't say a word, but his hands fumbled with the seam of the couch cushion like a child caught in someone else's argument. Isolde recovered first, her tone sharp with disbelief. "You can't be serious. This is about revenge? About ego?" "No," I said plainly. "This is about truth. About reclaiming the parts of me you all tried to narrate for yourselves. I won't be a character in a story I built." Vera softened her tone, switching tactics like she always did when the first didn't work. "We're still your family. This is just hard, emotional." "No," I said, my voice even. "It's not emotional. It's math. It's memory. You spent what I earned, then guilted me for not offering more. That's not family. That's theft wrapped in nostalgia." I laid a second document on the table, a digital access revocation form. "As of this morning, admin access to all nonprofit accounts has been revoked. Website, donation systems, social media. I built it under my name, with my credentials. You no longer speak for my work. You no longer use my story." Isolde's face turned a shade darker. Vera's lips pressed into a thin, brittle line. "You're destroying everything," Isolde spat. "All we've built." I shook my head. "No. I'm removing your names from things you never should have claimed. That's not destruction. That's correction." Still, Dorian said nothing. But I saw the way his shoulders curled in, the way his eyes avoided mine. "I trusted you," I said, looking at him, voice quieter now. "Even when you gave me every reason not to." I didn't wait for apologies. I didn't need performances disguised as remorse. I left the binder on the coffee table like a verdict, turned on my heel, and walked out. The door shut behind me with a soft finality. No slamming, no shouting, just an end. Outside, the air hit different. Cooler, quieter. It felt like the walls of that house had been holding their breath, and finally exhaled the moment I left. I stood on the porch for a moment, taking in the place. Not the people. The beams, the bricks, the years I gave, the foundation I poured myself into. They mistook my silence for absence. They forgot I never needed noise to make things move. They wanted a warning. They got one. What happens next is on them. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt clean. Like a wound that finally closed. Like silence that didn't ache anymore. That night, my phone rang. Not from them, but from someone who should have spoken a long, long time ago. I stood just outside the courtroom, my back pressed lightly against the cool marble wall, fingers grazing the edge of the folder, with my name printed neatly across the front. Maelis Dorn. No second party, no co-signer, no borrowed name or shared account, just mine, for once. It was oddly quiet in the hallway, save for the occasional shuffle of shoes or the distant echo of someone coughing. I liked the silence. It gave me time to think, or maybe just time to stop reacting. That night, the motel room was dark, save for the dim yellow glow of a lone bedside lamp. I'd barely unpacked. A half-open suitcase sat on the floor, my sketchbook resting beside it. I was drawing, not to create anything beautiful, just to stay steady. That's when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen since before everything fell apart. Ophelia. I let it ring twice, 3 times. My thumb hovered over the screen before I finally answered. Her voice was low, hesitant. Maelis, I thought you should know. They're planning to file for a restraining order. They want to get you removed, from the house, legally. I didn't flinch. My chest didn't tighten. There was no shock left in me to offer. Of course they are, I murmured, eyes fixed on the popcorn ceiling, tracing imaginary constellations. That's exactly the kind of thing they'd do. But I wasn't struck by the move itself. I was struck by the messenger. Why are you the one telling me this? I asked. She paused. Because I should have said something sooner. Her answer landed with more weight than she probably intended. And still, I let it go. After the call, sleep evaded me, so I sat up, opened my laptop, and went back to work. Not art this time, but evidence. I began sorting through years of digital paper trails, emails they never thought I'd save, screenshots of texts that read like confessions, notarized property records I'd paid for but never been allowed to speak about. Then I found it, almost by accident, buried in a backup folder from my old phone. A voice memo. It was Vera's voice, grainy but unmistakable. A voicemail I'd saved but never revisited, 18 months old. She was talking to someone, probably one of her prayer circle friends. She's too much like Arthur, Vera said. Quiet, calculating. That's why I'll never trust her with anything real. I listened to it once, then again, then a third time. Not for clarity, just to let it rot inside me until it became useless. The next morning, with sleep still nowhere in sight, I called Ophelia again. Why didn't you speak up back then? I asked her. Not with bitterness, just weariness. She hesitated. Because I was afraid they'd do to me what they did to you. They already did, I said softly. You just pretended it didn't happen. There was no argument, no justification, only silence then. I'm sorry. I know, I said. But that's the difference between us. I've already been cut off. I've already lived through it. We hung up with nothing left to say. That afternoon, I made my way to the public library. I printed every piece of documentation I had, copies of emails, screenshots of slanderous posts, a transcript of Vera's voice memo. I organized them in a crisp blue folder, one I'd bought just that morning. I didn't want to fight them. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a record they couldn't rewrite, because I was tired of being misquoted in my own life. I walked the folder straight into my lawyer's office. She glanced through the contents, her brows raising just slightly before nodding. This changes things, she said. In the elevator afterward, I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall. They declared war, I whispered. Not with fists, but with fiction. By sundown, I was back at the motel. The light outside was fading, painting the sky in that soft, melancholy hue between dusk and full dark. I sat on the bed, laptop open, and pulled up the family group chat. I scrolled, past old jokes, past cheerful emojis, past all the messages I'd sent in the last year, unanswered, unread, ignored. I didn't screenshot. I didn't draft a final message. I just left. No dramatic exit, no announcement. Just a quiet departure from a conversation that had long since stopped including me. On my desktop, Vera's voice memo was still open. I played it one last time as I packed the final shirt into my bag. But it didn't hurt anymore. Her words didn't echo. They confirmed. Confirmed that I was never their choice, just their shadow. I zipped my bag shut, stood up, and looked around the room one last time. No tears came, No trembling, just a deep breath. They could file their restraining orders, post their lies, push their narrative until it collapsed under its own weight. But what they would never reclaim were the parts of me they tossed aside like scraps. They didn't have to admit what they did, because I never forgot. And now I had proof. Not for them, but for myself. The court date wasn't about proving I belonged. It was about showing them, finally and irrevocably, that I'd stopped asking for permission to exist. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. No noise, no texts, no courtroom, just my name, and what I chose to do with it. The sky was still pale when I stepped out of the motel room. I drove in silence to the Sonoma County Courthouse, folder in hand, each document stacked in precise order. Deed, bank transfers, emails, a transcript of Vera's voice memo. I wasn't dressed to impress. I wore navy slacks, a sweater without branding, and flats that didn't click on the marble floor. This wasn't revenge. This was closure, with receipts. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table, nodding politely to the court clerk. When the judge entered, I didn't stand like I was afraid. I stood like I belonged. They arrived 10 minutes late. Vera clutched a tissue before she even sat down. Isolde had that familiar posture, shoulders squared, lips pressed thin, eyes already calculating how to twist the narrative. Dorian didn't come. The proceedings began with the judge asking for a clear statement of claim. I rose, took a breath, and opened the folder. "I'm the legal owner of the residence in question," I began. "2 years ago, my father transferred full rights to me. Since then, I've maintained the home, paid all taxes, and contributed significantly to its upkeep." I handed over a second folder. "Additionally, I've established an LLC in my name, which includes a trust fund valued at $1.4 million. That trust, created after I sold my shares in a health tech startup, was used to save that house from foreclosure." A small gasp rippled from the left row behind me. I continued. "I was the anonymous donor listed in the mortgage bailout. Not Vera, not Isolde, me." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying your family misrepresented the source of those funds?" "They didn't misrepresent," I said. "They accepted the help, then claimed the credit." I could feel Vera's eyes burning into the side of my face. Isolde whispered something under her breath to their lawyer. It didn't matter. They assumed I was broke because I stopped letting them count my worth. As closing statements began, I stood again. This time, I didn't read a summary. I read a letter. "To the court," I began, "and more importantly, to those who erased me so easily, I say this." I unfolded the paper slowly, slid it into the record. There comes a point when funding the fantasy becomes more dangerous than being honest. I'm not paying to be tolerated anymore. I reached into my purse and placed a small envelope on the desk in front of them. Inside was a voided check, amount 0 zeros, and one of my old debit cards, sliced clean down the center. The courtroom was quiet. The judge leaned forward. "Anything else?" I shook my head. "That'll be all." The gavel came down gently but firmly. "Petition granted. No further claims may be made by the defendants on the property or the LLC." Outside, reporters waited. I didn't stop. Vera called out behind me. "Maelis, wait!" I didn't turn around. "You already said everything you needed to say when you cashed me out and still claimed me." That night, I sat at a small desk in the new studio apartment I'd rented for the next chapter. The windows were bare, the floor still smelled of fresh paint, but I felt still. I opened my father's sketchbook again. One drawing caught my eye. The house, from the outside, pencil shaded with care. On the bottom, in his handwriting, "For her. Always for her." I smiled, not because it fixed anything, but because it finally unmade the lie. Closure didn't mean healing, but it meant I could finally stop bleeding for people who never knew they cut me. The cottage was quiet. Its stillness not the kind that felt empty, but the kind that finally allowed space to breathe. The windows cracked slightly, letting in crisp air. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug of coffee and stared out into the fog that hung low over the hills. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up needing to defend my name. Around mid-morning, a message lit up my phone. It was from Beth, an old friend from the church group I stopped attending years ago. "I just wanted to say," it read, "I had no idea you were the one behind the funding. They always made it sound like Vera and Isolde were the ones who saved everyone." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Thanks. I didn't do it to be remembered. I just didn't want anyone else forgotten." That message turned out to be one of many. Quiet acknowledgments from local groups, former volunteers, and even a retired principal who once worked at the school where I'd helped set up free counseling. It wasn't public applause, no spotlights, no headline, but it was real. It wasn't about being thanked. It was about reclaiming what I had given, without guilt, without distortion. Later that afternoon, I pulled the sketchbook from my shelf again. The very last page had always been left untouched, dog-eared from the years, but still blank, or so I thought. There, in soft pencil strokes, was a drawing of me, 17, standing alone at the gate of the old house, one hand gripping the post, the other tucked into my jacket pocket. I hadn't known he drew it. Beneath it, written in my father's hand, "She'll walk away first, but she'll build better." He dated it 5 months before he died. I sat there on the couch, that open sketchbook on my lap, and I let myself cry. Not from anger, not from grief, but from the quiet confirmation that someone had seen me the whole time. No performance, no pretense. Just truth in graphite and love without conditions. Word soon spread that Vera and Isolde's petition to appeal the court decision had been rejected. Isolde quietly stepped down from her firm, citing family complications. Dorian packed his things and moved out of Vera's house. His statement to a friend, "I just need distance." None of them reached out again. But for once, their silence didn't feel cruel. It felt honest, like they'd stopped pretending too. In early spring, I walked the cracked steps of an old property on the edge of town, a building I had just acquired through my nonprofit. The paint peeled, the sign had fallen, and inside, the floors creaked with memory. But I saw potential. Not for me. For women who needed what I never had. A space to be heard before they were pushed out. A volunteer painted trim near the entrance. Young, maybe 22. She looked up and smiled. "What should we call it?" I answered without thinking. "Calder House." She dipped her brush again. "What's the tagline?" I paused, then said, "For those starting over." Before I left, I hung a small sign on the front door. Temporary, handwritten, but firm. Not everyone needs a second chance. Some of us just need the first one no one ever offered. Sometimes we don't walk away to win. We walk away to stop losing pieces of ourselves. That house, those people, the titles they used, none of it ever defined me. I learned that silence doesn't mean weakness, and being erased doesn't make you invisible. It just means it's time to draw the line yourself. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel small, like your story didn't matter, let this be your reminder. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to stop explaining your worth to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. I chose peace over permission. I chose to rebuild where no one else was willing to welcome me as I am. And if that means starting over at 0, but with my name intact, then that's more than enough. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from family, not because you stopped loving them, but because they stopped seeing you? What did it cost you, and what did you gain? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home, or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know which part of the country, or the world, you're tuning in from. And if you didn't like this video, I still want to hear from you. Tell me why. Every story hits differently, and that's okay. If you felt something, if this spoke to even a quiet corner of your past, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more true life stories that reach deeper than just the surface. You never know. Maybe the next one will sound a little like yours.